Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the cult classic movie based on the books from Brian Lee O'Malley, as well as a released side-scroller back on the PlayStation 3, has had some interesting and redeeming traction throughout the years. Mainly from the recognizable cast showing their ever-constant love for the series and movie through returning involvement like the show and the 2020 Scott Pilgrim vs. the World reunion table read, where some of the cast had come back to read the entire movie script for Life Charity. But about January 2022, Scott Pilgrim Takes Over was announced and that it was getting a Netflix anime release, and I wasn't too surprised, but at the same time I was kind of interested in how they would adapt this for the same thing a third time over, and I'm not disappointed to say the least. So let's talk about it. There's also going to be heavy spoilers, so this is your warning now, but without further ado, let's get right into it.
Not so long ago, in the mysterious land of Toronto, Canada.
So when I first heard Scott Pilgrim was getting the show, I definitely can say I was interested, but not to the level that some others might have been for it. See, I was under the impression that it would just kind of follow the book a little bit more, hardcore if you will, than the movie had, giving us the events of the book in a full-depth kind of episodic series while keeping that unique design one-to-one with the books while matching the voices from the movies also. And boy, I tell you I was half wrong. See, the show doesn't only give us solid animation, great visual moments, or even some banger songs, but it does give us an entirely different plot twist I did not expect whatsoever when I watched that first episode, if you know what I'm talking about. See, if you don't already know the story of Scott Pilgrim, he's a 23-year-old nerd who basically lives in Toronto, Canada, playing occasional gigs with his band Bob-Omb, and till he meets this girl, basically Ramona Flowers, falls in love with her, fast forward a little, and he has to battle her 7 evil exes to be with her. But after the first fight with Matthew Patel, her first evil ex, he usually wins and is on to the next one, but not in this show. See, the curveball they throw in this show is that Scott is supposedly dead now, or so we think after the first initial episodes. And I think this is where the show really takes its liberties with creating a fun and newer story for the audience. We end up progressing through the second episode with this idea that Scott had been defeated by Matthew Patel, and everyone kind of moves on and shows their own kind of mourning, especially during Scott's funeral, where Envy Adams shows up and crashes it entirely. Envy Adams being Scott's superstar ex-girlfriend, by the way, who's also dating Ramona's ex-boyfriend. But after that, we get into Ramona's evil exes a bit more and how they'll interact within this league of evil exes as they deem themselves. So with Matthew defeating Scott, he goes back to G-Man Media, the evil corpo lair for Gideon Graves, Ramona's 7th evil ex. And Matthew Patel with the mindset that he gets to go back and win Ramona over because he defeated Scott, Gideon is basically like, well, let me show you.
I'm Gideon Graves. I own 2 record labels, a movie studio, 14 animal shelters, and this league. You're a D+ theater student with delusional Broadway dreams. This is a joke. You're not worth my time.
So it ends up bringing us into confrontation between these exes, where Matthew does beat up Gideon in this pretty lengthy fight, ultimately taking over Gideon's job as acting CEO of G-Man Media, and calling the shots for the League of Evil Exes. Fast forward a little bit, we end up cutting back to Ramona, and she basically has what Ben Affleck had in BVS with The Flash, but in different circumstances, of course, realizing that Scott is alive out there somewhere. So one of the main drawing points about this show for me is basically the humanizing aspects of Ramona's exes over time. See, in previous iterations, we see these characters in the way of Scott and Ramona, but there's always 2 sides of the story. Like what happens to the people we hurt and how it in return affects us, I think is one of the warming parts of episode 3, Ramona's Rent-A-Video. We see this battle abrupt between Roxy and Ramona take place and retouch past events that had led up to their breakup. But at one point during this battle, Ramona does apologize to Roxy for leaving the way she did back then when they were dating, admitting that she had been in the wrong for doing what she did to Roxy and leaving her because she was afraid. And in this moment, we kind of catch a glimpse of Roxy saying how she felt like nothing because of this, showing just a little bit how there's more to these characters than just revenge. This also happens with other characters as well, as Lucas Lee. We see the backstory after Lucas Lee and Ramona take on paparazzi and sit in the studio bay. Lucas Lee asks why she would help him, and she responds because she's always helped him, showing us flashbacks into the past of her helping him with his skateboarding and showing compassion towards him, only to forward it a little bit to where she had dumped him for Todd Ingram, leaving Lucas with this broken heart. But this look into the past helps Lucas realize that he wouldn't be who he is without that happening to both of them in their lives. While she doesn't inherently give her condolences to what she had done to him, it does help further humanize these characters in a way that is neat. We see this continue further on with episodes with characters characters like Todd Ingram finding his love with Wallace Wells, Scott's roommate, or Gideon being in a somewhat toxic relationship with Julie Powers, and I wonder where that could go, right? Or simple things like Matthew Patel still wanting to defeat Scott at some point, only to subside those feelings and do what he's passionate about, which is Broadway. But it's really moments like these that help bring these characters back around and make them less one-note and human, showing towards the end that they have ultimately moved on from wanting hateful revenge and would rather much live their lives rather than fighting over the past. So for point 2, it deals with no doubt that Scott and Ramona are inherently kind of two shitty kinds of people. I mean, Ramona did what she did with her coterie of exes and all that, and Scott is actively cheating on Knives, which he shouldn't be dating a high schooler anyway, but that's a whole nother plot point. We see these characters in the show take a developmental stage when it does come to the last 2 episodes though. We get present Scott in cahoots with older Scott, who has ripped him back from the present to the future, only to find him and Ramona are separated in this future timeline and no longer talking. So older Scott is basically trying to keep younger Scott from following through and getting in a relationship with her in the first place. Only to find out that in the next episode, the whole reason for this is because of an issue that they had with a little hiccup in their relationship, and he took it to extremes because he thought it was done and over, which wasn't the case at all in the slightest. We see all the 7 evil exes and Scott and Ramona battle even older Scott until it's just the original 2 present versions left in battle. Ramona has a talk with her older self and realizes that she is done running from the people she cares about the most and does join with older Ramona as one. They end up sending even older Scott back into his time to fix what he had caused between them two, while also telling Scott that she loves him, hopefully letting these characters learn from their alternate mistakes and showing how they can change their flaws and make them less defining for each other. But it's little fun notes like this that I think makes this show fun and entertaining, while not being without its flaws or drawing points, of course, because what is, it does mix with the likes of animated feel and a couple of fun episodes and leaves with quite the watch if you're a fan or just a casual viewer. But yeah, other than that, I hope you liked this little short video and my talking points of what I highlighted that makes this show worth a watch, I think, and I'll definitely see you guys in the next one.